The Galactic Military Academy's orientation hall buzzed with the nervous chittering of 1,000 alien cadets, their scales, feathers, and chitinous plates gleaming under the artificial suns. Commander Zicthara, a towering Veltarian with 6 arms and crystalline eyes, surveyed the fresh recruits with barely concealed disdain. "Another batch of soft-shell weaklings," he muttered to his aide, a gelatinous Blorbinian whose transparency revealed internal organs pulsing with anxiety. Among the crowd, 4 unremarkable bipeds sat quietly in the corner. Humans from the recently discovered Earth system, their pale skin and small stature making them appear almost sickly compared to the armored exoskeletons and natural weapons surrounding them. Cadet Zephyria Nightwhisper adjusted her standard-issue uniform, trying not to laugh as the hulking granite-born beside her flexed his rock-hard muscles for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Her companion, Corvin Dreamforge, was sketching something in his datapad while appearing to take notes, his dark eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. Across the aisle, twins Vexus and Nexus, Starweaver whispered to each other in their characteristic finish-each-other's senses manner, their conversation lost in the cacophony of alien languages that filled the massive chamber. Commander Zicthara's voice boomed through the translators, causing several species to instinctively assume defensive postures. "Welcome to the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. You are here because your worlds have deemed you worthy of training alongside the elite forces of the Galactic Confederation." However, his crystalline gaze swept dismissively over the human section. The humans exchanged glances, and Zephyria had to bite her lip to keep from snorting. Earth's Paradise World status had been based on preliminary scans showing liquid water and oxygen. The aliens had somehow missed the part about the radiation, the crushing gravity, the toxic atmosphere at ground level, and the fact that humans had to actively fight for survival against everything from microscopic organisms to weather patterns that could level cities. But they learned early in first contact that correcting alien assumptions was often more trouble than it was worth. The first week of training began with what the instructors called Basic Environmental Adaptation, a series of tests designed to push cadets beyond their comfort zones. The aquatic-born dominated the underwater trials, their gills and webbed appendages making them graceful dancers in the Academy's deepest pools. The crystalline-born excelled in the low-gravity chambers, their mineral-based physiology allowing them to navigate 3-dimensional spaces with ease. When it came to the humans' turn in the standard gravity chamber, the other species watched with detached interest, expecting the soft-looking bipeds to struggle with the basic coordination exercises. Instead, Corvin Dreamforge moved through the obstacle course like liquid mercury, his movements so fluid that the monitoring equipment initially flagged him as potentially cybernetically enhanced. The twins, Vexus and Nexus, attacked the puzzle-based sections with a synchronized efficiency that left the proctors scrambling to design harder challenges on the fly. Zephyria's performance in the strategic thinking scenarios earned her perfect scores, but more importantly, she seemed to anticipate problems before they occurred, adjusting her approach based on pattern recognition that the alien instructors couldn't quite follow. "Curious," muttered Professor Gleknara, a spider-like arachnoid whose 8 eyes could process information at superhuman speeds. "The humans appear to be adapting." The word tasted strange in her mandibles, as if she'd never quite encountered the concept before. Most species excelled in their areas of natural strength and struggled everywhere else. It was the fundamental basis of military specialization. But these humans seemed to treat every challenge as just another problem to solve, bringing the same methodical approach to underwater breathing exercises as they did to zero-gravity combat simulations. The breakthrough came during Week 3's Hostile Environment Survival training. The Academy's crown jewel was the Molten Fields, a carefully controlled lava plain where the heat-resistant species could prove their superiority. The thermal-born strutted confidently across the glowing rocks, their metallic skin handling the 1,000-degree temperatures with ease. The crystalline-born, while not quite as comfortable, could manage short exposures with their mineral-based physiology. Even the instructors wore full environmental suits, their advanced technology barely adequate to survive the hellish conditions. The humans showed up wearing the same basic protective gear as everyone else, but as they stepped onto the lava field, something extraordinary happened. Where other species moved with careful, deliberate steps to minimize heat exposure, the humans began to relax. Corvin actually stretched his arms above his head and took a deep breath. "Oh wow," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the comm system. "This is just like the summers back home in the Sahara. Anyone else getting nostalgic?" The alien's universal translators struggled with several of the terms, but the casual tone was unmistakable. Zephyria knelt down and actually pressed her gloved hand against the ground, testing the temperature. "The thermoregulation protocols are interesting," she commented to her instructor, a thermalborn whose confidence was beginning to waver. "But honestly, this is probably only hitting about 45 Celsius surface temp. We used to have barbecues in conditions hotter than this." She paused, considering. "Well, granted, we usually brought beer to those, but the principle stands." The instructor's translation software gave up entirely on barbecue and beer, simply emitting confused beeping sounds. The twins, meanwhile, had discovered something that made the Academy's environmental engineers break out in cold sweats. "The heat distribution patterns are suboptimal," Vexus observed, kneeling beside a glowing rock formation. "If you adjusted the magma flow by about 15 degrees, Nexus continued, producing a small tool from her kit, you could increase the efficiency by at least 30%. Before anyone could stop them, they'd begun making modifications to the lava field's carefully calibrated systems, modifications that, according to the suddenly frantic readouts, were actually improving the overall thermal dynamics. By week 4, the word had spread throughout the Academy. The humans weren't just surviving the hostile environment training, they were treating it like a recreational activity. When the Molten Fields exercise was repeated with increased difficulty, Corvin had literally taken a nap on a heated rock, using his pack as a pillow. The medical staff had rushed to intervene, convinced he was suffering from heat stroke, only to find his vital signs perfectly normal and his body temperature well within acceptable parameters. "This is actually quite pleasant," he'd mumbled sleepily. "Reminds me of the volcanic hot springs near my hometown." The Academy's leadership convened an emergency session. Commander Zicthara stood before a holographic display showing the humans' performance metrics, his 6 arms gesticulating wildly as he spoke. "These creatures should be dead, multiple times over. The gravitational forces alone should have crushed their inadequate bone structure. The temperature extremes should have cooked their protein-based tissues. The psychological stress of constant environmental threats should have driven them to madness." He paused, his crystalline eyes focusing on the data with growing unease. "Instead, they appear to be thriving. And more disturbing still, they're beginning to modify our systems to make them more efficient." Professor Gleknara's 8 eyes blinked in sequence as she processed the implications. "Commander," she said slowly, "I've been analyzing their home world data more carefully. The preliminary surveys classified Earth as a habitable paradise world based on surface conditions, but the detailed reports tell a different story." She gestured to her own holographic display, showing a blue-green planet that looked deceptively peaceful. "Their world is a Class XI death world. Everything there is actively trying to kill them. The radiation levels, the atmospheric pressure, the temperature variations, the biological threats, it's a wonder they survived long enough to develop space travel." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't been struggling with the Academy's challenges because they were difficult. They'd been holding back because they assumed the exercises were designed for much weaker species. Earth's paradise world classification had been based on the fact that it could support life at all, not on the fact that life there had to be incredibly resilient to survive. As the commanders stared at the data, a new understanding began to dawn. They hadn't been training the humans to survive in hostile environments. They'd been introducing them to the concept of safety. The final revelation came when Zephyria approached Commander Zicthara after the emergency session, her expression thoughtful. "Sir," she said politely, "I've been wondering about something. The Academy's mission statement mentions preparing cadets for the harshest conditions the galaxy can offer. But honestly, this has all been pretty mild compared to what we're used to. Are there any advanced programs available? Maybe something that would actually be challenging?" The commander's crystalline eyes widened as he realized that to these impossible creatures, the galaxy's most prestigious military academy had been nothing more than a relaxing vacation resort.